The day the will was read, the lie was already sitting in the room. No one knew it yet. Not the grieving daughter clutching her pearls. Not the ambitious grandson rehearsing fake tears. Not the quiet granddaughter who had loved the old man more than anyone else. And certainly not the lawyer who believed documents never lied. But one sentence, written in careful ink years before, would rip this family apart. If you love powerful, emotional injustice stories like this, make sure you subscribe to TruePulse Narratives TV and stay with this story until the end. Because what happens in this family will leave you questioning everything about loyalty, inheritance, and truth. The house felt different without him. Too large, too silent, too honest. The grandfather had built it brick by brick, and he had built his fortune the same way. From nothing, he arrived in America with a suitcase and a stubborn belief that hard work could bend destiny. He cleaned warehouses at night. He drove trucks during the day. He studied contracts under dim kitchen lights. Within 30 years, he owned construction companies across 3 states, commercial buildings, residential estates, warehouses, land, lots of land. He never flaunted his wealth. He invested quietly. He helped selectively. He trusted carefully. And he watched everyone, especially his family. He had 2 children, a son and a daughter. The son was charming, quick with jokes, quick with excuses too. He lived large, always chasing something bigger, faster, louder. The daughter was disciplined, image-conscious, socially polished. She cared deeply about appearances, what the neighbors thought, what the church whispered. Then there were the grandchildren, 3 of them. The eldest grandson, ambitious but restless. He loved money, not the work behind it, just the result. The middle granddaughter, the quiet one, observant, loyal. She spent weekends with her grandfather willingly, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The youngest, still in college, easily influenced, easily impressed. Everyone believed they understood the old man. They did not. The funeral was grand, but controlled. Just how he would have wanted it. No dramatic speeches, no chaotic crying, no public display of wealth. After the burial, the lawyer requested a private meeting at the estate, only immediate family. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Grief turned into anticipation. As the daughter adjusted her black dress twice, the son stared at the lawyer's briefcase as if it contained oxygen. The eldest grandson leaned back confidently. The quiet granddaughter sat straight, still, calm. She was the only one not calculating. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Your father updated his will 3 years ago." That surprised them. No one remembered a major health scare 3 years ago. No public announcement, no visible warning. The son frowned. The daughter stiffened. The eldest grandson looked irritated. The lawyer continued. He left specific instructions about how this estate is to be divided. The room tightened. Outside, wind brushed against tall oak trees. Inside, tension did the same. "Before distribution," the lawyer said carefully, "there is a condition." The word landed like a match near gasoline. "Condition?" The daughter leaned forward. "What condition?" The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "A letter." He reached into the briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope. Thick, cream-colored, marked with the grandfather's unmistakable handwriting. "For the family," it read. The quiet granddaughter's chest tightened. She recognized that handwriting. She had seen it in birthday cards, in old notebooks, in small notes left on kitchen counters. The lawyer broke the seal. Silence deepened. "My family," the letter began. "If you are hearing this, then I am gone. And if you are already arguing in your minds about money, then I was right to write this." The son shifted. The daughter exhaled sharply. The letter continued. "Nay, I have watched each of you carefully. I have seen your strengths. I have seen your weaknesses. I have seen your love. And I have seen your ambition." The eldest grandson forced a small laugh. It died quickly. This fortune was not built for comfort alone. It was built for character. The lawyer paused. The daughter spoke softly. "Just get to the point." The lawyer resumed. "My entire estate will go to one person." The words hit like thunder. The son straightened. The daughter's lips parted. The eldest grandson's eyes widened. The quiet granddaughter blinked slowly. "One person," the lawyer repeated. The letter continued. "The one who proved loyalty without expectation. The one who stood by me when there were no cameras, no contracts, and no promises." The room felt smaller. Sweat formed on the son's temple. The lawyer read the final line slowly. "My granddaughter." The silence was absolute. The quiet granddaughter froze. The eldest grandson shot upright. "What?" he snapped. The daughter's face drained of color. The son stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous." But the lawyer was not finished. "There is an addendum." The air grew heavier. "If any member of this family contests this will," the letter stated, "or attempts to manipulate the decision through legal or personal pressure, the entire estate will be donated to a charitable foundation." That was when fear replaced outrage, because the estate was worth far more than anyone publicly knew. The eldest grandson laughed nervously. "This is a joke." He was sick. He wasn't thinking straight. The lawyer's voice was firm. He was medically evaluated at the time of signing. Perfect mental clarity. The daughter's voice trembled. He would never cut his own children out. The lawyer looked directly at her. He did. The quiet granddaughter finally spoke. "I didn't ask for this." No one responded. Because deep down, they knew something uncomfortable. She had been the one visiting weekly. She had been the one driving him to appointments. She had been the one sitting quietly while he told stories no one else had time to hear. But loyalty did not matter now. Money did. And money distorts truth. That night, the first lie was born. It started small. A whisper between the son and the eldest grandson in the kitchen. She manipulated him. It sounded easier than admitting neglect. The daughter added her own layer. She must have pressured him when he was vulnerable. The quiet granddaughter heard the murmurs. She said nothing, because she believed truth would defend itself. She was wrong. By the next morning, extended relatives were calling. By the afternoon, church friends were whispering. By evening, the narrative had shifted completely. The quiet granddaughter was suddenly greedy, calculating, deceptive, the one who isolated the grandfather. No one mentioned who stopped visiting years ago. No one mentioned unpaid loans. No one mentioned broken promises. The lie was cleaner than the truth, and easier to swallow. 2 days later, the eldest grandson made a decision that would change everything. He visited the lawyer privately. He carried documents, old medical notes, selective statements. He suggested the grandfather had early cognitive decline. The lawyer frowned. This contradicts official medical evaluations. The grandson shrugged. Doctors miss things. It was subtle, carefully planted doubt. Not enough to challenge legally, just enough to muddy perception. And perception is powerful. When the quiet granddaughter was called back to the estate for a clarification meeting, she walked in unaware that the ground beneath her had already shifted. Her uncle avoided eye contact. Her aunt folded her arms. Her cousin stared at her with something cold in his expression. The lawyer spoke cautiously. "There have been concerns raised regarding your grandfather's mental state at the time of signing." Her heart dropped. What concerns? Claims that he may have been influenced. The word echoed, influenced, by her. She felt heat rise behind her eyes. That's not true. But truth was no longer the loudest voice in the room. Doubt was, and doubt spreads faster than facts. Outside the estate, the wind picked up again. Inside, something darker was forming. Because this was no longer about inheritance. It was about reputation, control, power, and a lie that would soon grow too large to contain. The fortune had been assigned, but the battle had just begun. And before this story ends, someone will lose far more than money. The first time she heard it said out loud, it didn't even sound real. She isolated him. The words floated across the living room like smoke. Casual. Poisonous. It was her aunt speaking. Softly, almost sympathetically, as if she were explaining something unfortunate but understandable. She was always there, always controlling access. The quiet granddaughter felt something fracture inside her. Controlling access? She had been the only one showing up. But that didn't matter anymore, because once a lie finds its voice, it begins to grow. Within a week, the narrative evolved. At church, heads tilted when she walked in. Old family friends avoided her eyes. One woman hugged her aunt tightly and whispered loud enough to be heard. "I can't believe she would take advantage of her own grandfather." Take advantage. The quiet granddaughter stood still as the weight of it pressed against her ribs. No one had asked her side, and no one had asked what those weekly visits looked like. They hadn't seen the grandfather struggling to open jars. They hadn't seen him sit quietly after dinner, staring at old photographs. They hadn't heard him say more than once, "They only remember me when they need something." The eldest grandson leaned into the lie carefully. He never shouted it. He implied it. He would say things like, "Grandpa wasn't himself toward the end," or "He seemed confused sometimes." Small seeds, planted repeatedly, and the more they were repeated, the more solid they felt. The uncle added another layer. There were financial transfers before his death. There weren't. But by the time anyone verified that, suspicion had already attached itself to her name. The lawyer called for a formal meeting. He was uncomfortable now. "Allegations have been made," he said, choosing his words carefully. "While no legal contest has been filed, these claims could escalate." The quiet granddaughter sat straight. "What exactly are they saying?" "That you may have exerted undue influence." The phrase felt sterile, legal, but its meaning was brutal. "They're saying I manipulated him." The lawyer didn't respond. Because yes, that's exactly what they were saying. That night she went back to the grandfather's house alone. She still had access. For now. The house felt colder, not physically, emotionally. She walked into his study. Everything was untouched. His leather chair, his reading glasses, the framed photograph of the family taken 10 years ago, before resentment had replaced warmth. She sat in his chair and whispered, "Why didn't you tell them? Why didn't you explain your decision while you were still here? Why did you leave me alone to carry it?" Tears came quietly, not loud, not dramatic, just steady. But something unexpected happened. As she opened one of the drawers in his desk, she found another envelope. Smaller, with her name on it. Her breath caught. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. "You will be blamed," it read. She froze. "I know my family. They love comfort more than accountability. They will question you before they question themselves." Her chest tightened. "But I chose you not because you needed the money. I chose you because you understood me." Her vision blurred. "If they try to twist the truth, remember this, I kept records." Her pulse quickened. "Records? Everything is documented in case loyalty needed proof." The letter ended simply, "Truth does not shout, it waits." She folded the letter slowly. For the first time since the will reading, something shifted inside her. Not anger, not fear, clarity. Meanwhile, the eldest grandson escalated. He contacted a private physician who had briefly treated the grandfather for minor blood pressure issues. He asked leading questions. Did he ever seem forgetful? Was there any sign of cognitive decline? The doctor was cautious. Nothing that impaired decision-making. But that wasn't how the grandson repeated it later. He told relatives there were concerns, vague enough to grow. The daughter began to cry publicly. I can't believe my own father cut me out." She told friends she felt betrayed, humiliated, embarrassed. She framed herself as the victim, and slowly, sympathy tilted toward her. Because people are more comfortable believing a grieving mother than a quiet granddaughter. The quiet ones rarely win perception battles. 3 weeks after the funeral, a formal letter arrived. From a law firm. They were requesting a review of the will's validity. Not a contest, yet, but a review. The lawyer sighed heavily when he called her. "They're preparing." Her hands tightened around the phone. "I have something," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" "Documentation." There was a long pause. "Bring it." She returned to the estate the next morning with the envelope. The lawyer read the grandfather's second letter carefully. His expression changed. "Records," he repeated. Where would he keep them? She thought for a moment. The basement office. Few people knew about it. The grandfather had converted part of the basement into a private archive years ago. Locked cabinets, filing systems, digital backups. He believed in preparation, especially when money was involved. They unlocked the basement room together. Dust lingered in the air. Metal cabinets lined the walls. The lawyer began opening drawers. Inside were labeled folders, loans, transfers, medical evaluations, handwritten journals. The lawyer stopped at one particular binder. Visitor log. He opened it. Dates, times, names, every visit over the past 5 years. Meticulously recorded. The pattern was undeniable. The quiet granddaughter's name appeared weekly, sometimes twice a week. The others, scattered, months apart, sometimes nearly a year between visits. The lawyer exhaled slowly. This is powerful. She nodded. But something still felt unsettled, because lies don't collapse easily, especially when pride fuels them. Upstairs, footsteps echoed. Voices. The family had arrived unexpectedly. The uncle's voice boomed. What are you doing down there? The eldest grandson followed, suspicion sharp in his eyes. The lawyer stepped forward calmly. Reviewing documents. The grandson's gaze shifted to the binder in his hand. What documents? The lawyer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he held up the visitor log. Silence fell, and for the first time, doubt flickered, not toward her, but toward them. But pride is a dangerous thing, and humiliation often breeds escalation. The eldest grandson didn't retreat. He doubled down. Visits don't prove mental clarity, he said sharply. Anyone can manipulate an old man over time. The accusation hung heavy. The quiet granddaughter felt the sting. But she didn't respond emotionally. Instead, she asked one question. If I manipulated him, why did he document everything? No one answered, because that question cracked something, not enough to end the battle, but enough to weaken it. That night, the uncle made a private call, not to a lawyer, to someone else, someone who specialized in financial investigations. If there's any irregularity, he said quietly, or I want it found, even if it had to be created. And that is when the lie crossed a line, because suspicion had now evolved into intent to discredit, intent to destroy, intent to reclaim what they believed was rightfully theirs. The fortune was no longer just money. It was ego, legacy, control. And the quiet granddaughter was standing alone at the center of it. But what they didn't realize yet was that the grandfather had prepared for more than just doubt. He had prepared for betrayal, and the next revelation would not simply defend her. It would expose them. The investigator arrived quietly, not dramatic, not obvious. He dressed like someone who preferred shadows over spotlights. The kind of man who didn't ask questions twice. The uncle met him in a private office downtown. I don't need something big, the uncle said. Just inconsistencies. The investigator raised an eyebrow. Inconsistencies? Anything that suggests she influenced him. Financial transfers? Pattern changes? Withdrawals? The investigator nodded slowly. I'll look. But even as he agreed, something in his tone suggested this would not go the way the uncle expected. Meanwhile, in the basement archive, the lawyer continued digging. The grandfather's filing system was obsessive. Each year labeled, each account reconciled, each check scanned and stored. Then they found it, a locked fireproof box. Inside were USB drives. The lawyer inserted one into his laptop. A folder opened. Estate clarification. Her breath caught. Inside were video recordings, dated, time-stamped. The grandfather appeared on screen. Older, yes, but clear-eyed, calm, sharp. In the first recording, he sat at his desk. If you are watching this, he said steadily, then I assume my will has caused discomfort. He gave a faint smile. I expected that. The quiet granddaughter felt her pulse in her throat. The lawyer leaned forward. I want this recorded clearly, the grandfather continued. I am of sound mind. I have been medically evaluated within the past 6 months. My decisions are deliberate. He held up documents to the camera. Medical assessments, financial summaries, signed and dated. I have not been pressured. I have not been manipulated. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I have chosen based on character, not blood. The recording ended. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Finally, the lawyer whispered, "This changes everything." But pride doesn't surrender easily. When the investigator began his work, he found something unexpected. Not irregular transfers, not hidden withdrawals, not unusual patterns. Instead, he found something else. Repeated withdrawals from the grandfather's accounts over the past 4 years. Small amounts at first, then larger, always labeled vaguely. Business assistance, temporary loan, bridge funding. The trail led to one place, the eldest grandson. The investigator leaned back in his chair. Interesting. Back at the estate, tensions simmered. The daughter cried again, during a family gathering. He was confused. He must have been. The uncle nodded solemnly. We'll prove it. The quiet granddaughter said nothing. She no longer felt the need to defend herself loudly. Truth was forming its own structure, and it didn't require shouting. A week later, the investigator requested another meeting with the uncle. His tone had changed. "Did you find something?" the uncle asked eagerly. "Yes." The uncle leaned forward. The investigator slid a folder across the desk. "These are documented financial transfers from your father's accounts to your nephew's businesses." The uncle blinked. "That's irrelevant." "Is it?" the investigator replied calmly. "The amounts total over $2 million. Silence. The uncle's face shifted. "That was support." "Was it declared as a loan?" the investigator asked. The uncle hesitated. "Not formally." The investigator folded his hands. There is no record of repayment." The lie had just collided with reality, because if the grandfather had been manipulated, why had the grandson been the one receiving undocumented financial support? Why had he been the one quietly dependent? Why had he needed the money repeatedly? The narrative was cracking. Back in the basement archive, the lawyer opened another USB file, another video, the grandfather again, this time more direct. "I have supported my eldest grandson financially more than anyone knows," he said plainly. Her breath stilled. "I do not regret helping him, but I regret the secrecy." The grandfather paused. "I fear that when I am gone, he may resent the finality of my support." The lawyer looked at her. The weight of that sentence was heavy. "If he contests this will," the grandfather continued, "understand that his anger is not about fairness. It is about dependency." The recording ended. The room felt electric, prepared, documented, strategic. The grandfather had seen it coming. But the family didn't know about the videos yet. They only knew tension was rising. The eldest grandson grew more aggressive. He sent formal notice of intent to challenge the will, not because he had proof, but because pressure sometimes forces settlements. He believed she would fold. He believed she would negotiate. He believed she was too quiet to fight. He was wrong. At the preliminary legal meeting, both sides sat across from each other. Polite smiles, cold eyes. The uncle spoke first. "We believe our father was unduly influenced." The lawyer responded calmly. "Based on what evidence?" The uncle gestured vaguely. "Behavioral changes." The lawyer nodded. "And what changes were those?" Silence. The eldest grandson interjected. "He withdrew from us." The lawyer's tone sharpened slightly. "Or did he withdraw because you only visited when you needed funds?" The room froze. The grandson's jaw tightened. "That's a lie." The lawyer slid a folder across the table. Bank statements. Another folder. Visitor logs. And finally, a flash drive. Video declarations. The air shifted. For the first time, uncertainty crossed the faces of the accusers. They played the first recording. The grandfather's voice filled the room, clear, steady. "I am of sound mind." The daughter's eyes widened. The uncle's face paled slightly. The eldest grandson stared at the table. The video ended. No one spoke. The lawyer broke the silence. "Would you like to continue?" No one answered, because the lie had just lost its foundation. But humiliation is volatile, and instead of retreating gracefully, the eldest grandson made a fatal mistake. He spoke impulsively. "He promised me more." The words escaped before he could stop them. The room went still. The lawyer tilted his head. "Promised you more?" The grandson swallowed. "That's not what I meant." But it was, and everyone had heard it. The contest wasn't about confusion. It wasn't about influence. It was about expectation. He believed he deserved the fortune. And when he didn't receive it, he called it injustice. Outside the building, reporters had begun to gather. Whispers of a family inheritance battle had leaked. The narrative was shifting publicly. At first, headlines implied manipulation. Now, they hinted at entitlement. The quiet granddaughter felt the weight of exposure. She never wanted attention. She never wanted to be the center of controversy. But sometimes, truth demands visibility. That night, she returned once more to the grandfather's house. She stood in the study, not to cry this time, not to question, but to understand. He had known. He had predicted the reaction. He had documented everything, not because he doubted his decision, but because he doubted their character. And that realization hurt more than the accusations. Because it meant betrayal had been expected. Meanwhile, the investigator submitted his final report. It was clear. There was no evidence of manipulation. There was, however, evidence of financial reliance by the eldest grandson. The uncle read the report slowly. His hands trembled, not from anger, from realization. The lie they had created to reclaim control had exposed something far worse: dependency, greed, entitlement, and now it was documented. But one more revelation remained, because in the final folder of the archive, there was a sealed letter addressed to the entire family, not just her, everyone. And its contents would not simply defend the will, it would redefine the legacy. The envelope was thick, heavier than the others, is sealed with the grandfather's old-fashioned wax stamp. It wasn't addressed to one person. It simply read, "To my family." The lawyer placed it on the table during the next meeting. Everyone was present this time: the daughter, the uncle, the eldest grandson. Two distant cousins who had suddenly become interested in the estate, and her. The quiet granddaughter sat at the far end, still composed, still steady. But something had changed. She was no longer defending herself. She was watching truth unfold. The lawyer cleared his throat. This letter was stored with documented estate records. It appears to have been intended for disclosure only if conflict arose. Silence spread across the room. The wax seal broke with a soft crack. The lawyer began to read. If you are hearing this," the letter began, "then my death has become an argument." The daughter's breathing shifted. The uncle crossed his arms. The lawyer continued. "I did not divide my estate by habit. I divided it by observation." A faint tremor passed through the room. "For years I paid attention, not to what you said, but to what you did." The eldest grandson's jaw tightened. "I saw who visited without asking for anything." The daughter's eyes flickered briefly toward her. "I saw who called only when business struggled." The uncle stared at the floor. "I saw who believed my wealth was a future entitlement." The air thickened. No one interrupted, because no one could. "I love you all," the letter continued. "But love does not require blindness." The words landed carefully, precisely. I chose the one who treated me as a person, not a portfolio." The quiet granddaughter felt something settle inside her chest. Not victory, recognition. The letter shifted tone. "Let me address the lie I expect." Everyone stiffened. "I was not confused. I was not pressured. I was not isolated." The lawyer paused slightly, then continued. "If any of you attempt to claim that I lack clarity, understand this. I recorded medical evaluations for this purpose." The eldest grandson's face paled again. The uncle's composure began to crack. "And if any of you believe financial support equates to ownership, Review your own accounts. The room went still, because now it was no longer about her. It was about them. The letter concluded with something unexpected. I leave my granddaughter not only my estate, but responsibility. The quiet granddaughter looked up. She has full authority to distribute portions of my fortune if she believes it aligns with my values. Gasps were subtle, but they were there. She owes you nothing, but she may choose generosity if you demonstrate growth. The lawyer finished reading. Silence, heavy, unavoidable. The lie had not only been dismantled, it had been anticipated. The eldest grandson stood abruptly. "This is manipulation," he snapped. "No," the lawyer replied calmly. "This is preparation." The grandson's voice sharpened. He turned her into a gatekeeper. The quiet granddaughter spoke for the first time that afternoon. "He turned me into a steward." Her voice was steady, not loud, but clear. The difference mattered. The uncle tried one final angle. "This doesn't erase how hurt we feel." She nodded slowly. "I don't deny your feelings." She paused. "But feelings aren't facts." The words echoed longer than expected, because they weren't cruel, they were accurate. After the meeting, the daughter lingered. Her eyes were red. "You could fix this," she said softly. "How?" "Divide it differently. Make it equal." The quiet granddaughter studied her carefully. "For years, you told him he worked too much." The daughter flinched. "You told him money didn't matter." Another flinch. "But now it matters enough to destroy his final decision." Tears spilled freely now. The daughter turned away, because grief mixed with guilt is unbearable. That night, headlines changed. Instead of "Granddaughter accused of manipulating elderly tycoon," they now read, "Estate documents reveal prepared defense against family challenge." Public opinion shifted, slowly, but visibly. The narrative was no longer suspicion. It was strategy. The grandfather had foreseen conflict and built walls around truth. But something inside her was unsettled, because even though she had been vindicated, the family was fractured, and money does not mend fractures, it widens them. She walked through the grandfather's house again, not as a visitor, not as a caretaker, but as its legal owner. The realization felt strange. He had trusted her with everything. But what did that actually mean? Ownership or accountability? The lawyer called 2 days later. They're considering withdrawing the challenge." She nodded. "They should." "There's something else," he added. "What?" "The tax exposure related to undocumented financial transfers may create complications for your cousin." Her eyes closed briefly. So that was the final consequence. The lie had forced transparency, and transparency had exposed dependence. She didn't feel satisfaction, only inevitability. That evening, the eldest grandson sent her a message. Short, cold. "You've destroyed this family." She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she responded, "No, I just refuse to lie." She didn't block him. She didn't argue further. Because some battles end not with explosions, but with silence. Weeks passed. The legal challenge was officially withdrawn. No apology came. No acknowledgement, just a quiet retreat. Pride rarely admits defeat. But something unexpected began to happen. Distant relatives started reaching out, not for money, for clarity, for explanation, for reassurance. Because once the full story surfaced, perceptions shifted. She was no longer the manipulator. She was the protector of his intent, and that carries weight. One evening, while sorting through the remaining files in the basement archive, she found one last recording. unlabeled. She pressed play. The grandfather appeared again, this time softer, more reflective. "I don't know if you will forgive them," he said gently, "but I hope you forgive me." Her throat tightened. "I am giving you a burden disguised as blessing." He paused. "Money magnifies character, including your own." Tears formed again. "If you keep it all, they will call you selfish. If you give it away, they will call you weak." He smiled faintly. "Choose who you want to be, not who they accuse you of being." The video ended. The room felt quiet, not heavy, clear. The lie had changed everything, but not in the way they expected. It hadn't taken the fortune away. It had revealed character. It had exposed dependency. It had tested loyalty. And now it would test her. Because the real decision wasn't about defending the will anymore. It was about what she would do next. Would she divide it to restore peace? Would she keep it to honor intention? Or would she do something no one anticipated? Money has weight, not physically, but morally. And for the first time, she felt it fully. The accounts had transferred. The estate was settled. The house was legally hers. The companies were now under her authority. On paper, she had won. But victory felt complicated. For weeks, she avoided public decisions. No grand announcements, no dramatic redistribution. She moved quietly, reviewing contracts, meeting long-term advisors, studying financial structures her grandfather had built over decades. She wanted to understand before she acted, because reaction is emotional, but legacy is deliberate. The uncle attempted one final conversation. He showed up unannounced at the estate. He looked older, tired. "Can we talk?" he asked. She invited him inside. They sat at the long dining table where holidays once felt warm. "I know what the letter said," he began. But families don't survive on principles alone." She waited. "You could divide a portion, not because you have to, but because it would heal things." She considered his words carefully. He already divided what he believed was right. "That was his choice," the uncle replied. "Now it's yours." And that was true. That was the part that kept her awake at night. Later that evening, she met privately with the lawyer. "I want to create something," she said. "Charitable?" "Yes, but not impulsive." She outlined an idea. Not a simple donation, not a symbolic gesture, a foundation, structured, accountable, focused on financial literacy and small business mentorship. Her grandfather had built wealth from nothing. He had always said, "Money without understanding becomes poison," and she wanted to teach understanding. The lawyer leaned back slowly. "This will reduce personal liquidity." "I know. And it won't silence critics." "I know." "Then why?" She didn't hesitate. Because legacy should create strength, not dependency. When the announcement came, it surprised everyone. She did not divide the inheritance among family members. She did not write personal checks. Instead, she allocated a significant portion of the estate to establish the foundation in her grandfather's name. The remainder she kept under strict investment management. Not hoarded, not flaunted, protected, strategic. Public reaction was swift. Some praised her, some criticized her. The eldest grandson released a statement calling it a public relations maneuver. But privately, and something else was happening, because the foundation required advisors and qualified applicants and proposals and accountability. It was not a handout. It was an opportunity. Months passed. The eldest grandson's business began to struggle again. This time, there were no quiet transfers, no undocumented assistance. He applied to the foundation. Not directly. Through a formal proposal. Detailed. Transparent. For the first time in his life, he had to present his business plan without entitlement. The review board considered it carefully. She did not sit on the decision panel. She recused herself intentionally. The board approved a conditional mentorship grant. Not cash, guidance, oversight, milestone-based funding. When he received the notice, he was furious, then humbled, then silent. Because for the first time, support required effort. The daughter visited again one afternoon. Not to negotiate, not to argue, just to sit. They had tea, quietly. "I read about the foundation," the daughter said softly. She nodded. "He would have liked it." "Yes," she replied. "He would have." A long pause followed. "I'm sorry," the daughter whispered finally. Not loudly, not dramatically, but sincerely. For believing the worst. The quiet granddaughter held her gaze. Grief makes people look for someone to blame. Tears formed again. But blame doesn't rebuild trust. "No," she agreed, "it doesn't." That day, healing began. Not loudly, but honestly. Meanwhile, the uncle approached her with a different tone. He wanted to volunteer with the foundation, look to mentor young entrepreneurs, to contribute something meaningful. It surprised her, but she allowed it, under structure, under policy, under oversight, because forgiveness without boundaries invites repetition. The public narrative shifted again. The girl once accused of manipulation was now seen as strategic, measured, principled. The lie that had attempted to destroy her credibility had instead sharpened it. But something deeper had changed, inside her. One evening, she returned to the study again, the same room where she first felt accused. She sat at his old desk, opened one of his journals. Inside, she found a handwritten line: "True wealth is not in possession, it is in preservation." She read it 3 times. Preservation. Of values. Of intention. Of discipline. That had been the real inheritance, not the money, the responsibility. Months later, during a foundation event, the eldest grandson approached her quietly. He looked different, less defensive, more grounded. "I didn't understand," he admitted. She didn't respond immediately. "I thought he owed me." She nodded slightly. "He didn't," she said gently. He swallowed. "I'm trying to build something without expecting rescue." "That's the only way it lasts," she replied. For the first time, there was no tension between them, just truth and humility. The lie had changed everything, but not by destroying her. It had revealed hidden fractures, forced uncomfortable clarity, exposed entitlement, tested loyalty, and ultimately redefined legacy. Because inheritance is not about distribution. It is about direction, and she chose direction over division. Years later, when people spoke of the estate battle, they no longer focused on accusation. They spoke about the foundation, about the entrepreneurs it helped, about the financial education programs in underfunded communities, about how one family conflict led to structural change. The fortune remained significant, but its impact multiplied, quietly, consistently, intentionally. On the anniversary of his passing, she played his final recording one more time. "Choose who you want to be." She smiled softly. "I did," she whispered. The lie had tried to rewrite the story, but truth had written something better. And legacy, when protected with courage, does not divide. It builds.